In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about a photography technique that will really help your composition. I must admit it's something I don't do often enough, but it will really help you understand tone and contrast and how to make your photos a lot more interesting. What is this miracle? Go shoot in black and white. Now let me give you 3 tips to help you. Now the first thing you need to do is plan to shoot in black and white. So what I do is I set my camera's image profile to black and white. Now if you're following my earlier lessons, I always told you to shoot in RAW, and what happens in RAW when you've set that profile to black and white is it'll still capture a full color RAW image, which you're going to need to convert in your post-processing. But what it'll show you in your viewfinder or on your live view screen is a black and white image, so immediately you can see if your image is interesting or not. Now the great thing about it is it works equally well on cloudy and overcast days, so you don't need to wait for that fantastic weather to go and do this kind of photography. And it works with all sorts of subjects as well. So first thing I would do is say start simple, and I'm going to start with just photographing some vegetables. Now why am I starting with vegetables? Well, if you want to see some amazing shots, black and whites, of things just like a pepper, check out the work of Edward Weston. He was a I think he did this in the 1930s, and he got some amazing results in black and white. A little tip for you is don't go to your local supermarket to buy your veg. You'll get perfectly shaped peppers. So unless it's got a wonky veg section, I went along to my local farm shop where I also found this Conjamon melon, and it's got all these lovely markings on it that I know, these bits will go dark and the lines will go light, so it'll really pop in black and white and make an interesting shot. So we'd definitely want to start with that. So let's get stuck in and show you what's going on. Welcome to the channel. I'm Richard Gill. I'm a professional photographer. I'm not normally playing around with fruit and veg, but it's a great subject for black and white photography. So if you're looking for tips and tricks on how to improve your photography and take better photos, then come along and join me on my videos. That's what I do on this channel, provide free photography tutorials for those of you who want to learn how to get more out of your camera, how to compose and edit your photos, and generally improve your photography. I've set my photos, I've set myself up a table in the shade in my garden, so I've got some nice soft natural light. Now I've got a background here that is a sort of mauve and purples and pink, so it's quite dark, but some of the lighter colours will come up white in black and white. That's my lens cap there if you want an idea of what something black looks like on it. And I've got my few fruit and veg here, and I'm going to play around with the composition of those and take 2 or 3 different shots. And I'm just going to do sort of close-ups of those. I'm using my nifty 50 lens on here, and I'll use quite a small aperture because I probably want to keep that depth of field. Sorry, I'm going to use a wide aperture because I want that depth of field to be short. The other thing I'm going to use is a reflector, and what that will do is obviously it'll reflect light onto my subjects, and you can see as I hold it over these fruit and veg how it changes the shadows and the highlights, and that can make my photo more interesting. So I'll be playing around with that a little bit too. Okay, so let's take some photos, see how they come out. So there's a couple of other things you should be aware of here that I'm doing. One is I've got my camera on a tripod, and The other is so I'm using a self timer, 2 seconds delay, so I don't get any shake from when I press the shutter button to taking the photo, and that should keep it nice and sharp. And the rest of it I'm just playing around with the reflector just to see what gives a pleasing image, and I'll probably crop in and the final edit just to make the melon more of the final subject. But the veins and the patterns in this is what's going to make it interesting in the black and white shot. Now, I did promise you 3 tips, and so the first one was to start with something simple, and the second thing that it was cargo by. The second thing you should try is do some long exposures. Now, won't work quite so well for a still life subject like this, but in a moment I'm going to go to another location. But the third thing you should do is also try a bracketed or HDR exposure. And what that does is it brings up all the detail in the shadows as well as all the details in the highlights, because you're going to set your camera to take 3 exposures and then you're going to blend them together. So you'll take one at the perfect exposure, one I would say 2 steps over, and one 2 steps under. And you can set that automatically in your camera. Now, if you don't know how to do that, then you need to watch one of my earlier videos on getting to grips with your camera. I'll put a link to that up above. And now, if you do enjoy these videos and get a lot out for them, please make sure you give this a like, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, you might find it useful to do so. I'm going to head out now to Glasson Dock, as I mentioned before. It's a lovely little old port by the edge of Morecambe Bay, and it's got a real mix of different scenery. There's a nice marina there. There's also some old boats, some old wrecks, and some other industrial bits and pieces about, so should make for some great photos. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to go there is because I want to practice some long exposure shots, because they're what will bring you more life to your black and whites. It can really enhance, especially things like whites when you're taking pictures of the sea. And the tide should just be coming in as I get there, so hopefully I can get 1 or 2 shots on the water there that will show you how to use long exposures there as well. We'll probably practice a little bit of our bracketing and just some standard photos as I have a walk around too. So let's head off and go to Glasson Dock. We've come down to Glasson Dock this morning. It's a bit of a dull day. It's a great day for black and white, so let's see what we can find. It's a really interesting location, this, because there's a marina. You often get some guys on motorbikes turning up, and there's lots of old industrial stuff, some old boats as well, so should make for some interesting photos. I'm going to have a walk around and see what we can find. I've found a location behind me with a few boats. Now the tide is just coming in. What I'm going to do is a long exposure. So long exposures work really well with black and white, and if you want to see some really fantastic examples, check out the work of Michael Kenner. He does these incredibly long exposures, often hours of exposure in black and white to produce some really amazing shots. So I'm going to put ND filter on my camera, get that set up and see if I can find a pleasing composition. And the long exposure is going to make the water absolutely silky smooth. So let's get set up. I've got my camera all set up on a tripod here, and let me take a step back and just show you something, a little nifty 50 photographer's tip for you. So if you ever have to set your tripod up on a slope, then make sure you put the single leg lower down the slope. That helps to give your camera more stability. So if it's going to fall over, it'll usually fall over on the 2 legs, which I put up the bank in this case. Obi's helpfully modelling that for us. And so this is the scene that I'm looking at. whether you'll be able to see on the back of the camera. So I've set my profile to black and white so I can see what I'm looking at. I'm just looking for different contrasts. I'm going to do long exposure. I've got a 10 stop ND filter on it, and it's going to be about a 20-second exposure. So that'll smooth out all the ripples in the water. It's actually a very calm day, there's no waves, even though the tide is coming in. It's coming in very gently. So I'm going to take that shot now. I've just moved to a slightly different location, just wanted to try a different composition where I could isolate these three boats by themselves, and a little bit more pleased with that. Just doing a short exposure of that one. Found this anchor which I think will look good in black and white because it's a solid black, and there's a just trying to find the right angle. Now, there's actually an old pub behind it that's rather black and white too, so I think if I put that in the background, that's my best option, because all the other angles there's a lot of sort of clutter in the background which is going to not help the composition. I'm just going to do a shot of the marina behind me. So I found what I think might make a nice shot. The clouds are starting to become a bit more interesting now in the sky. Got patches of blue and clouds, which I think in black and white could be quite nice. It's a change of contrast. And I'll have the water in the forefront and the layer of boat. So I've got a light layer, dark layer, and then a mixture of light and dark above it. And that's what you're starting to think about in black and white. You're really trying to think about your composition much more carefully and what things are going to come through. So I'm going to take this on a long exposure, probably about 10 seconds to smooth this water right out. Use my 10 stop ND filter because it's actually now becoming quite a bright day. And let's see how that comes out. I've just found one other interesting subject. This is a chap called Bill who was just sat having a coffee with his dog, and I just liked sort of contrast of his clothes, his beard, his rugged face, and I just asked him, and he was happy to have his photo taken. So thanks to Bill. Here's the shot of Bill. Now, just having a little walk around, I found a couple of other things that might be interesting to photograph. I'll just show you. So over here we have an anchor buried in a rather unkempt bit of garden, and I think there might be some nice opportunity there. And then further over here there's a couple of boats in this little dock area, and one in particular I like, which looks like an old sort of schooner, an old fishing boat perhaps. Maud Raby is actually a Morecambe Bay prawner, and she was the last boat built by Crossfields of Arnside in 1932, so she would have been used to catch the little brown shrimps that are very popular from this area. I just found this old submerged boat. I've been coming here for a few years, and every year it gets lower and lower in the water. It's pretty much all gone, just the wheelhouse sticking out now. So I'm going to try and take a few shots of that and see if I can get something interesting as well. What I decided to do actually was take a really long exposure of this, because I wanted the wheel that's out of the water to go really white, and maybe the rest of it to be dark, and I thought it would create quite a nice minimalist photo. So I've put on both my 10 stop and my 16 stop filters and exposed it for about 2 minutes. I think that's going to give a pleasing result. I hope you've enjoyed this video playing around with wonky vegetables. These are all nice simple things for you to practice at home, and I'd love to see some of your photos, so feel free to share them in the Nifty 50 Photographers Facebook group. I'd also welcome any comments and feedback you might have, or anything you're struggling with in your photography. I'd be happy to give you a hand. And if you're looking for some tips on getting started and more advanced techniques, I do have a free ebook called 50 Tips to Improve Your Photography. I'll put a link to that in the description. You can download that and you can use those tips to help you take better photos. And remember to check back next time. I'll see you in the next video with more great tips and tricks.